Hi all, this is Skate, and this is the Tier 10 Chinese tank destroyer, the WZ113G FT. While I'm rabbiting on, I have two replays in this video. One starts off very slow and then becomes a bit more aggressive, and the next one is very passive actually. But it's still a very interesting battle. E5 on our team, who does loads of spotting for me, racks up huge amounts of spotting damage, and I end up in a 1 versus 4. But we'll chat about that when we get to it. So this is the Tier 10 113G FT, and I bloody love this thing. I like a lot of tanks. I'll always try and find the good in a tank, but coming into this one I was quite apprehensive. The Tier 9 is brilliant, and a lot of people told me when you get to the Tier 10 it just won't feel as good as the Tier 9 does. But from my personal experience, it's not the case. This thing is fantastic. Yes, the Tier 9 is also fantastic, but where this differs slightly is in the armor layout. I'd still play this exactly the same as the Tier 9 in terms of medium range is kind of a no-go because it exposes the lower plate too much. Close range and long range are the best to play this tank, which is the same as what I tried to do on the Tier 9 tank, which is why I say medium range is a no-go, because at medium range you expose that lower plate, but at the long range it makes it difficult to hit all those weak spots, and at the close range, well, you've got a massive gun mantlet to help you. Now the gun mantlet on the Tier 10 is smaller than it is on the Tier 9, but that's not necessarily horrific, because this has 230mm of frontal armor, frontal sloped armor as well. And that makes that front end very, very troll. Yes, those cheeks, which are angled, are still only 80mm. When you're facing something directly, they are pretty much auto bounces. But when you angle up too much, they are very, very easy to penetrate. So something which needs to be kept an eye on. And as I explained in the Tier 9 video previously, if you're popping around the corner using full gun arc, if you're using the right-hand side of a building, make sure you keep the right-hand cheek inside, because that way you're not overexposing it and you're not giving it as one giant weak spot. And by keeping that right hand side tucked in, obviously they're not going to be able to shoot that 80mm cheek, which is going to be quite flat if you're using the full gun arc. But as well as that, you're covering part of the tank and you're basically giving a very well aggressively angled 230mm front, but half of it's made up of a giant gun mantlet. So it's a hard target in that circumstance. Now, I'm not saying it makes it impenetrable, but it makes it very, very thick in terms of effective thickness, and, like I said, with the mantlet, it makes it a very hard hit anyway. And I prefer that. I prefer knowing that there's a glimpse of a chance of penetrating the front. And the comparative I'm going to use to try and explain this is the T110E3. If you see the front of a T110E3, you're not going to waste your time trying to shoot anywhere around the mantlet. You are going to concentrate on solely trying to get that lower plate. Well, either that or the excessively weak trek wheels. But you know they are going to be easy pens if you aim at that place. Which obviously with an E3, you know you're not going to penetrate the rest of it frontally, so you're going to be aiming for those spots. And if you do hit those spots, you know they're going to penetrate. As with the front of this thing, you always feel like, oh, it's 230 armor, you've got a good chance of penetrating it. So you'll find people shooting at it constantly. And they won't waste their time looking for weak spots in the lower plate half the time, because they will try regardless, because you will penetrate sometimes and sometimes you won't. But they'll try go for that front upper plate, and there's a good chance of hitting the mantlets, and there's a good chance of getting bonkers ricochets. So because of those things, it actually kind of keeps you alive that little bit longer, because you'll always, every game, you'll always get people firing at the front of this thing, because they know there is a chance of penetrating it. I suppose for that reason I prefer this to the T110E3, because this has got better mobility, it's got slightly better damage per minute, it's got better accuracy, and they are the compensation for not having that monstrously thick frontal armor. I mean, even a 268 is a comparative. 268's got slightly better accuracy, exactly the same damage per minute, considerably weaker frontal armor. 268 does have better mobility, and one more degree of gun depression. 268's got 7, E3's got 8 by the way, and this has got 6 degrees of gun depression. I think if this thing had any more gun depression, the frontal armor on it would just be bonkers. And I can definitely live with the 6 degrees of gun depression on this thing. But the whole point of all this, obviously, except for just talking about the armor in general, is the armor is very, very troll on this thing. And it's made even more troll by using those 6 degrees of gun depression, or using the gun arc, or getting up close, so you just jam your big old mantlet in the face. The only thing I kind of feel this tank is well, I say lacking, but where this drops in comparison to its rivals is like T110E5 has 295mm penetration, as with the object has over 300, even a Death Star over 300mm. This has 290, but it's hard to say something with 290mm of penetration is lacking something. You don't really struggle with 290mm of penetration. The Tier 9 290 had the same. It's phenomenal at Tier 9, especially when you're dealing with Tier 8s. At Tier 10, you still don't struggle with that amount of penetration. You very rarely have to switch to heat. I think the real reason for using heat is just wanting that absolute guaranteed penetration when you need it. Both this and the Tier 9 one had 375mm of penetration on its heat, which is more than adequate in nearly every single scenario you come across. The big difference, by the way, going up from Tier 9 to Tier 10, aside from better accuracy, you're actually looking at an extra 500 damage per minute as well. With a gun like this, is very tasty. And the other thing I really think is overlooked about tanks with big caliber guns is how useful that HE is. It's so user-friendly, and it's good for polishing off targets when you don't want to worry about penetrating if they're low hit points. It's just useful. In fact, one thing I've wanted to do for a while, is make a video on using HE, because there's so many scenarios where we don't use HE where we should, or we don't try. I'm going to try splash the back of this thing with HE now. It doesn't work. But in many, many scenarios, it would have worked. In fact, now I'm thinking about it, I'm going to make that video. It may not sound massively exciting on the face of it, but using HE is something which I think is often overlooked. Some people don't even see it as a skill. I think it is, personally. Knowing what ammo types to use can really make a significant difference. Yes, when you see something big and squishy, you should always switch to HE. But you see people splashing tanks with HE when they can't penetrate. I do it myself. Rather than try and sit there aiming, leaving myself exposed, sometimes I'll just pop out, launch a HE in the face, and then go back. It's severely overlooked as a resource. I mean, mouse, rather than sit there trying to overexpose, I'm not saying do it all the time, launch one HE into the engine deck. Good chance of fire, good chance of ripping those tracks apart, and most importantly, it makes them use one of their consumables. But I will actually make that other video. It's talking about it's intrigued me. I want to talk about this right now. I've barely moved. I haven't moved from this spot. But I haven't been useless here. I've done 3,700 damage here. And more importantly, I think being here, I've been a good resource for that T110E5. Well, my team which went that direction, we've got an AFK by the way on the left as you can see, but the team who went that direction got absolutely mullered by the enemy team. And if I rushed in now, I would get obliterated on my route down. However, while I was here, we've done over 4,000 damage trying to keep that E5 alive. If I did rush in, I would be absolutely obliterated by the unspotted enemy team. And I was constantly putting useful shells in. I fired a blind heat shell there, which I believe hits, because when that guy reappears, he is a one-shot. Which is ideal, really, because I am in a 1 versus 4 scenario. Now, I know some people would hate the fact I've sat on that ridge and camped. But my logic genuinely is I've been effective in terms of being a support role. Even before we were left alone in this 1 versus 4 scenario, I already had more than 1,500 damage more than the next person down. The point I'm trying to get at here is I genuinely don't think camping is a bad thing unless you don't have targets to fire at. If I didn't have anything to shoot at then, I would have been absolutely useless sitting in that spot, but we had plenty to try and fire and lay down cover with. IS-7's come around from the other side now, and I am at this medium range. My lower plate's perfectly exposed and an easy target for him, which means he went straight into the lower plate. But it does mean I'm going to load that heat for a reliable, straight through the front of him penetrating shot. This leaves us in a 1 versus 2. Last spotted on this side of the map was the Death Star. Last spotted on the other side of the map was the enemy E-100. I was aiming to use this IS-7 to cover me while I pop around the corner, making me a smaller, harder target, but he's not far enough around the corner. My guess, though, was that the Death Star is round here, and it did guess right. We are very well angled, and we bounced the Death Star. Again, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I used the full gun arc to the left. My inside cheek was exposed, which makes my outside cheek insanely bouncy, and it makes the outer area of the tank insanely bouncy. And we're guesstimating that the E-100 is coming from this side, and again, it pays off. And this is where I think map awareness can be so important. They aren't fast tanks, they can't relocate that quickly. By spotting them earlier in the game, trying to keep an eye on them, I think gave me this little bit of an advantage here, because I had a good indication of what direction they should be coming from. Doesn't always work that way, but it can really help to your advantage. And I realised I got very lucky with the Death Star not splashing me with Hesh. I'm glad he fired an AP round, because it gave me a chance. I'm not so confident with this E-100 that he's not just going to splash me with a HE round, which is why I'm being very, very cautious. I've only got to splash him with a HE round, and he has only got to splash me, so it's all about who gets that shot off first, which is why I am being so careful to try and make sure my gun is on the corner as I come round, not come around the corner and then have my gun on him. But there he is, and we do manage to get the HE off first, thankfully. We're showing 6,200 damage on the top left hand side there, but that doesn't include the blind heat shell on the IS-7, which takes us up to 6,857 damage. I want to show you the results screen as well, and on there I want to focus on the T110E5, because you'll see he's got a fair chunk of base XP himself. And if you click on him, well, you can't click on him, if I click on him and we go and have a look, you'll see he's got massive amounts of spotting damage. Damage caused with player's assistance at the bottom there, 3,957. So massive respect to that guy. I honestly don't think, and I genuinely think this, that if I wasn't where I was, I don't think he would have survived as long. And if he wasn't where he was, I wouldn't have survived and done the damage I did. But I think that's a very nice example of the abilities of the tank across those two replays. I have tons more replays of this tank recorded and saved off, so I can always do more videos on this tank in the future if you're interested. And knowing me, I've probably missed loads of bits on the tank and forgot to mention certain bits, but all in all, I think the most important thing is using the armour to your advantage to keeping you alive, because the longer you're alive, the more damage you can in theory do. One thing's just reminding me actually, camo net. I'm running a camo net on this tank, and I think this tank has fantastic camo values. There's been many scenarios where I should have been spotted, but have not. So get yourself a camo net on this tank. But yeah, that's all for this video. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.